Yes, it's a fascinating story, I think, geopolitics, because it's often misunderstood. That's why it's even more fascinating for people. I think that I'll start first by talking about the early 2000s, when we were in a situation of high oil prices and long-term contracts between Gazprom and its customers in Europe, and long-term contracts which were linked to oil prices. And at the time, Europe was, I think, a little bit concerned that it needs to rely on Russia to balance its energy demand, and there was a drive at the European Union level for diversification of supply. And talks about new supply sources, particularly from the Caspian and Central Asia. How does Russia use its position at that particular time? The position of high oil prices, the position of really great influence in terms of gas supplies. So first, it offers sweet deals on gas in exchange for control of the transit pipelines in Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova, and also for some downstream assets or to countries which appear to be friendlier than the others. Also, it uses its control over transit routes from Central Asia to make market access hard for Central Asian producers. At the same time, it starts promoting expensive transit avoidance pipelines, having failed to somewhat reach a mutually acceptable agreement with the transit countries. It started building expensive pipelines which bypass those transit countries. Nord Stream gas through that pipeline is already running, and South Stream to avoid transit through those countries. So what happens subsequently is that, obviously, as you all know, the shale gas revolution in the United States, great excitement about the new gas abundance, and also the result of change of export markets for liquefied natural gas, which was supposed to go to the United States and now is going to Europe. And also this affects the traditional price formula that Gazprom was using in its deals with Europe. And there is a talk about delinking gas prices from oil prices. And buyers seeks price renegotiation, and Gazprom starts losing its market share in Europe because of these new sources of gas. At the same time, one interesting development of this period is that Russia also China ends Russia's monopoly in Central Asia by constructing Turkmenistan pipeline from Turkmenistan via Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan to China, which is down there. And at the same time, Gazprom comes under increased domestic pressure from politically connected, independent gas producers to allow access to its export monopoly, and also to reconsider the price system that Gazprom is using in its deals with Europe. One interesting aspect of this all is the cheap and plentiful gas in the United States, and how it's going to play or be played by both in the United States, both domestically but also internationally. If the gas is used domestically, it could potentially hurt European manufacturing and chemical industries because of the United States will have competitive advantage. It could also displace oil, so North American oil could start flowing to international markets and become more volumes will be available. And as a result, we may see a massive reduction of US dependence on the Middle East. And the question will be whether the United States will disengage militarily and then diplomatically from that region and agree to be replaced with China. China, as you can see from this slide, is a premium market for LNG, which is no longer needed in the United States. China's role in Central Asia has also increased because of pipeline projects and also because Russia is a declining power there. And in a way, China is becoming a very important player in terms of creating a new energy Silk Route from Iran to the Far East and potentially promoting a greater stability in the region.
You've got about a minute.
Okay. But what will Russia will do? What Russia is likely to do in this situation? Russia is likely to choose gas volumes over prices, because Gazprom is at the moment is under a lot of pressure from independent gas producers whose gas production is actually lower domestically. Doesn't cost them as much to produce gas, but also because tax contribution of Russian gas sector is only 3 to 5% when it comes to the Russian budget. What it means that low gas prices will change the EU energy mix in favor of gas. It will promote economic recovery in Europe and demand as well. But at the same time, it will undermine renewables and LNG. At the same time, another interesting aspect about those transit avoidance pipelines, which I mentioned earlier, is that Russia-backed pipelines, Nord Stream and South Stream, could potentially transport newly increased Russian volumes. They now make sense. That now makes sense, so those pipelines will be used for that purpose. And the final slide and some final points.
One final point. The rest you can put in the questions.
Okay. Does gas help or hinder making the world a safer place? Obviously, the increased availability of supplies and the increased diversity of sources is a very important factor. And because gas producers are becoming more responsible, being more responsible by this new competition. And producer-consumer relations as a result and mutual dependence will create greater stability. At the same time, some transnational pipelines, such as Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India pipeline, could promote as well integration and stability in those regions. But one final point is that the battles will continue, but there will be battles based around markets, routes, regulation, technology, competitive advantage and prices, and environment. And domestic politics will play the key role in that, particularly in the United States and Russia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shamil's minute is about as long as a St. Petersburg night in the summer. But we have one hand up at the front here. And I think, yes, I might take a few questions together, but we could take the lady at the front first, and then this gentleman here, and I can see you all as well.
Hi, I'm Katinka Barish from the Center for European Reform. I'm going to give you another 2 minutes on your last point, whether unconventional gas will have a stabilizing or destabilizing impact on the international political environment. On the one hand, you could, of course, argue that if a country such as Poland has, or even Ukraine, has significant unconventional gas finds, Russia will no longer be able to play shenanigans with its energy policy in its neighborhood. So the European scene looks more stable. On the other hand, I'm wondering if nations feel independent, will they start making stupid mistakes? Will they especially smaller countries, will they start behaving in a way that is actually destabilizing? And you could even draw that point to China. Isn't a bit of energy interdependence in the world quite a good thing? Because countries need to be nice to each other if they depend on each other.
Very nice question, thank you. Can I just have one behind there, please? The gentleman, second row.
Alex Ferguson from the CBI. I'm interested to hear what you think, or how likely some global price convergence is over the medium term in the gas markets, and also how do you think US domestic politics will affect the ability to export LNG from the US?
Sorry, what was the part of your first question? Sorry, I didn't
do you think, will there be are we moving towards a global gas price convergence? And if so, to what extent?
Yes, please take those two first. Be reasonably concise if you could.
Yeah, the first The argument that I think, taking on Katinska's last point about when countries become independent, I think this is something that Russian politicians have always been complaining about, saying that, oh, this is the old Warsaw Bloc mentality, those people hate us, and they're actually creating more problems in a relationship with Europe because they became independent and they're trying to play their own political games and game in international relations. I think that a lot of that will depend on whether there will be actually shale gas development in the foreseeable future in those countries that you mentioned, because I think that Russians really have the capacity to act quite quickly. And as I said earlier, there is a lot of pressure now, particularly from companies such as Novatek, but also from the Russian oil companies, particularly Rosneft, which is moving into gas business very actively, and could potentially displace Gazprom to a certain degree within Russia, and also externally. So I don't know, I think that it's often difficult to make predictions. Your question, is it related to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? When we look at this, another important aspect to remember about all these forecasts that we're talking about, if you look at the latest, they're talking about 2035, 2040. So we're looking about, 20, 30 years ahead. Look at what we're now in year 1920, 20, 30 years ahead. What has happened in the world? So I think this is an important point, that the world is changing at a very fast pace, and I think that a lot of this forecasts and predictions are just a guide for us to base our decisions. Used to base our decisions on.
Could you just move through so you get to the end of the
the next
question?
point. The next point is I'm basically saying that I think it's unlikely that they will play the destabilizing role, simply because I think it will take them quite a while to actually reach that competitive advantage level. Okay. In terms of the gas prices and also U.S. decisions in America, I think it will be. In terms of your last point, your second question, I think it's the U.S. will probably use both gas domestically but also export it. So I think there will be a decision reached which will satisfy all the interested parties in the United States. When it comes to global prices, I'm not going to answer this question. What I suggest you do is that on the 1st of November, buy a book which is edited by Jonathan Stern, which is dealing with this very issue, the book is about global gas prices. Okay, it looks at different markets.
Okay, well, if you don't to buy a book, that's always a good time to move on. I'd like to just take one more brief question at the back there, and also one brief answer.
Alan Riley, City University. I think my questions are simply, first of all, in relation to the Russian gas supply. The International Energy Agency last year in the World Energy Outlook was talking about the Russian gas market having to replace 90% of production by 2035, so 635 billion cubic meters, replace something that the order of magnitude in terms of investment is $730 billion in 2010 dollars. Now, one of the questions is can Russia actually supply that gas? Especially given its kind of high north strategy. Is there cheaper gas available? Actually, should Russia go for shale gas, which might be cheaper itself? And the other kind of bigger question, which affects Gazprom and, in fact, all of the gas suppliers, is this. One of the questions which is not debated is not so much the impact of cheap LNG being dumped in Europe or in Asia, but the effect of the shutting off of the coal markets in the United States because of cheap gas and the coal being dumped in Europe and other parts of the world. And the danger is if you start getting a lot of shale gas developed in the rest of the world, they will look for markets to dump the coal. And ironically, rather than Europe leading the world into renewables, the actual future for Europe may well be as the dumping ground for coal. And this will affect principally the European gas suppliers like Gazprom.
I think we need to sort of cut it off there.
And that's my,
sort of take
my,
it-
so my point is the coal, the
Yeah.
issue for Gazprom in part is about its gas and its ability to actually deliver the investment in an area of high corruption and low investor protection. And then on another side is the threat it
I
faces
think we've
from
got
coal.
it now. I think we really have to take an answer, sir. Thank you very much.
I think I partially answered your question when I talked about the role of independent gas producers and I talked about the role of Rosneft. One of the reasons for the current re-emergence of Rosneft, so to speak, is that Rosneft potentially, together with international oil companies, could, as I said, displace Gazprom's role. So I think just focusing on Gazprom is not really entirely accurate. I think you should look at when we're talking about these issues, we need to look at what the independent producers can do and can deliver. And again, which volumes we're talking about? How much? For Russia at the moment, I think the key dilemma is to retain its role in the European markets, potentially maybe increase it slightly.
And sorry, I'm really going to bring you to a close, but did you take the coal point seriously as a sort of serious, sort of unforeseen consequence, as the gentleman suggested?
Not really, no. I think it's...
But you two can sort that one out afterwards then. Thank you very much indeed, Shamil.
Thank you.